Hey guys, so this is going to be your lecture on interviewing, which is the appendix in the back of the book. Looks like that. Begins on page 272. So what we're going to be talking about first is interviewing, and then the types of questions that go into interviews and the different types of interviews themselves. What we're going to be doing in class is an employment interview. Remember, both you and your partner will have chances to sit on both sides of the interview. So you all get one partner. One time, one will be the employer, the other person will be the interviewee, and then you'll flip. And so you will interview your classmate for a job, and they will be interviewed by you. You have 5 minutes per interview. This will all be in an assignment write-up, but just putting that out there so you know that's what's happening and sort of take in that information. You do need to create a resume. You can add to one that you already have if you want to. And also you need to create a job description for the job you choose to interview your classmate for, as well as about 15 questions. Some people you need to have at least 15. Some people add on another 2 or 3 just for cushion to make sure they meet that 5-minute time requirement. So let's jump in. Let's talk about the definition of an interview. This is a highly structured conversation in which one person asks questions and another person answers them. What you will be creating, basically those 15 questions are going to be what is known as an interview protocol. The list of questions used to elicit desired information from the interviewee. So if you think about it, if you don't utilize your questions well, then you're not going to get the information you need. So if you're interviewing somebody for a job, if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to know if they're a good candidate for the job. You're wasting everybody's time. So questions are some of the most important parts about an interview. So let's talk about the different types of questions. So the first category of questions, primary and secondary questions. Primary questions are introductory questions about each major interview topic. Secondary questions are follow-up questions, basically. So if you would ask something about maybe somebody's education in an employment interview, you might say something like, what was your major in college? That's a primary question. Then a secondary follow-up question would be something like, what was one of your favorite courses that you took in your major? So you can see how that leads right back up to the primary question of your major in college. It's getting more specific. It's a follow-up, getting more information. Sometimes follow-up questions are really good to have with very, very important questions. So if your person that you're interviewing does not give you enough information in that primary question, you have a couple of follow-ups just in case to get more information out of that person. So it's a good idea for your most important questions to have 1 or 2 follow-ups. The second type in questions we're going to break down is open-ended versus closed-ended questions. Pretty much every single one of your questions needs to be open-ended. You might have 1 or 2 closed in there, but more than that, I'm going to start marking off for points, and you're going to get docked because you're not going to meet that 5-minute time limit. It is very important to make sure that you have mostly open-ended questions. So open-ended questions are questions that leave the answer, it could be anything, literally. It's more than just a 1 or 2 word response. So it would usually begin with something like what or why or how. Those are questions that are really going to elicit a very open-ended response. Whereas a closed-ended question is 1 to 2 words as a response. So usually yes or no questions. Those are not good questions because you're literally going to get 1 second out of that one. And it's not going to be a lot of information. You're not going to learn a lot about the person. So you might have literally 1 or 2. But more than that, I'm going to start docking points, and you're going to see points taken off as well in your actual interview because you're not going to meet time limits. So make sure most of your questions are open-ended, and be careful by those questions that seem like they might be open-ended, such as, how many kids do you have? 0, right? So that's a closed-ended question that began with how. So be careful about those two. Just be on the lookout. That's what I want you guys to be. One of the things I want you to watch for when you meet up with your partner on Thursday is making sure that you are checking over each other's questions to see if they're open versus closed, if they're in a good order, things like that. So that's one of the things you can keep an eye out for when you're working with your partner on Thursday. Or if you're my night class when you meet on Wednesday. So the third type of questions that you guys need to know about is neutral versus leading questions. So open-ended and closed-ended questions may also be either neutral or leading. So neutral questions do not direct a person's answer. It can literally be anything. Those are usually the types of questions you want. Leading questions are just like what they sound. You're taking the person and leading them to the answer that you want them to say. So so take these two questions, and you'll see how the difference comes about when you're asking. So first one, open-ended, neutral question would be, what importance do you place on using good grammar in writing? Okay, it's literally, it's open and it's neutral. The person can respond however they want. Now, you could turn that into a leading question if you said something along the lines of, you think using correct grammar in writing is important, right? You can obviously see how that's leading, right? You are leading them to tell you that they think using important grammar is right. And in an employment interview, it's important to get the person's gut true reaction, so you wouldn't want to lead them to any responses. You want to see what they actually think, because you need to see if they're a good fit. So that's yet another thing I want you guys to be looking for when you're working with your partner is, are there a lot of leading questions? If there are, you need to figure out a way to turn those into more open-ended questions, because more neutral questions and open as well, because that's what you need. So now we're going to talk about the different types of interviews. So there are information gathering interviews, which is exactly what they sound like. Most of the things in this book are pretty much named for exactly what they are. You are literally seeking information. So you can apply a lot of the things that you learn in doing this activity in class and creating questions to this. So if you were going to interview somebody to write a paper to have a really good source, this would be an information gathering interview that you would do if you found, an expert in the field that you wanted to interview. Last year I had to write an article for a magazine that I've worked for, and I had to do a lot of research for it. And one of the main sources of information was a professor and former president of the university I went to, who founded the department that I was talking about. So I had to call him. Unfortunately, we were in different cities, so I had to call him. I couldn't do it face-to-face, but we did an information gathering interview. I set up questions, had some follow-up questions, and I made sure to take a really good notes so that I could get all the information out of that interview as possible. And then he was, like I said, one of my main sources of information for when I actually started writing. So you never know when you might have to do something like that. I rarely ever have to do those, but when you do, like I said, that was one of the biggest sources of information that I had for that article. So without that, it really would have been difficult to write the article well. So I was glad that I had the skills of interviewing, because I think I got a lot of information out of him. So a couple of tips on doing those types of interviews: dressing professionally. If you're having to do it over the phone, making sure you sound professional. Be on time. This goes for every interview, obviously, but especially if you're asking somebody to do a favor for you, or if you're going in to interview for a job. Ask permission before recording. So some people just get weirded out by that. So if you have a recorder, just make sure that it's okay with them. Keep the interview moving. You don't want it to drag. You don't want it to feel like you're taking up too much of their time. Confirm credentials. Make sure you know exactly what they do, because that would be kind of embarrassing for you if you quoted somebody incorrectly and did not cite their proper credentials. Making sure you end on time, starting on time and ending on time, very important. Give them a heads up about how long it's going to take as well, so that they'll know to budget that much time. And then also thanking the person afterwards, and then possibly even sending a follow-up thank you note via snail mail or email. Very, very, it looks really good when you do that, and it shows that you were very gracious that they gave up their time to talk to you. Second type of interview is an employment interview. So that's what we're going to be doing in here. So very important for you guys to be good at this, because a lot of you are either in the workforce right now, looking to possibly, go up the ladder, or you're in college for the first time and this is a really great place for you to gain some skills to go out into the workforce, or maybe the specific workforce that you want to be in. Maybe you're, not working where you want to be and you want to move to somewhere else. So these are the kinds of skills that I want to give you so that you present yourself in the best way possible. So if you're looking for a job, you're known as a job seeker, as the book puts it. Anybody looking for a job or considering a job change is that actual definition. So if that's you, you're a job seeker. So pay attention to this good stuff. And you might be in the future, even if you're not now. So make sure that you're paying attention to your network. The book mentions how important networking is. It's the process of using or developing an established relationship to make contacts regarding job openings. So anybody you know is part of your network. So make sure you pay attention to that and utilize it well. Make sure that you create a really, really good resume. So I'm going to post an example of an old resume of mine. So I want you to kind of use that as a guide. Keep it to one page. Keep it easy to read. Make sure that you have a really good objective statement that you're going to tailor for each job that you go into, because sometimes a blanket objective statement is not going to work for every single job. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Make sure your resume is something that's definitely a really good glance over of your skills and your experiences. Obviously that's what it's supposed to be, but sometimes that, along with the cover letter, which you should write for every single job, you shouldn't just have a blanket cover letter either. Those are the first pieces of communication that they see to get you called in for that interview. So they need to be good. So make sure you don't need a cover letter for this assignment, but you do need a resume, your job description for the one you're interviewing for, and your 15 questions. That's the part of the assignment you need. But make sure that your resume, which is going to be due at the end of this week, you're just going to turn it in online. Make sure your resume, like I said, easy to read, on one page. It's a really good snapshot of you. And keep in mind that you may tailor your resume for whatever job it is that you're going in for. If it's a resume that doesn't have a lot to do with customer service, and maybe you right now have your jobs listed and customer service is like the first two jobs you have, and then you have a couple that are not in customer service, you may want to, instead of using a chronological order on your resume, you may want to use a functional resume is the technical term for it. So you would put the most important jobs for that apply to that job you're applying for, the most important work experience at the top, so they could see that you're a really good fit for the job. So consider those kinds of things when you're putting your resume together. A lot of people have a chronological one. That's probably, that's the one that I'm going to post. It's an old one, but it's set in chronological order, and you can see how I've put details underneath every job so that people know exactly what I did at those jobs, so they see the skills that I'm good at. So when you're conducting the employment interview, make sure that you, again, do the same things that we did before. You have your questions, you have the right people that you need to interview. You need to make sure that you do a couple of things, though. Introductions and opening and closing rapport. That's R-A-P-P-O-R-T, rapport. So this would be something as simple as saying when somebody walks in the door, shaking their hands, introducing yourself, making sure they know what they're there for, and then saying something like, you find the place okay, or, how's your day going, or if it's a Monday, hope you had a good weekend. And then also at the end, doing the same thing. I hope you have a great week. Thanks so much for coming in, shaking their hands. You'll be hearing from us in, 2 weeks about your position. So things like that, those are the things that are going to make people feel more at ease and more comfortable. And because it's usually a stressful situation doing interviews, you want to have that opening and closing rapport. So make sure you put that in your notes for yourself when you're doing your interviews, because I will be looking out for that and making sure you have that within. So opening rapport, something as simple as, hope you found the place okay, or hope the, how's the weather out there? I hope it's okay, things like that. And then the thank you so much for coming in at the end, making sure they know when you're going to hear from them, closing rapport, so that you feel like you've established a little bit of a relationship as opposed to just going in and answering a lot of questions or, regurgitating a lot of questions. So, on the flip side of the interview, if you are the interviewee, you're the person being interviewed, make sure, again, you're on time. You want to make sure that you present your best self. Have things like your cover letter and resume printed up just in case they want to have something easy access. Look professional. And then prepare a little 60-second summary. I call this the elevator speech. It's supposed to be known as the elevator speech because it's something that you should be able to say on a quick ride in an elevator. If somebody said, hey, tell me a little bit about your employment background and what your aims are, and if you had your dream job or something like that, just tell me a little bit about yourself, which, let's be honest, is one of people's favorite questions in the beginning of interviews, and that's such a broad question. So this is a great way for you to say, okay, well, here's what I'm really good at, here's some of the jobs I've had in the past, and here's what I'm looking to do, here are my goals. So, funny story, my boss and one of my professors in undergrad and grad school actually got her job at my university because of an elevator speech that happened on an actual elevator. She was at a conference where the chair of my department, the communication studies department, was. It's a big communication conference, so a lot of people from a lot of different universities were there, and he recognized, because she had a name tag on, that she was a member of the conference, and so they were on the elevator going down to one of their meetings, and he looked at her and asked her what she did, where she worked, and where her areas of research were, and so she was able to answer that in a quick little conversation, and that got the ball rolling for her to, apply for the job and come in for some interviews and campus visits, and now she is actually chair of the department a few years down the road. So you can see how elevator speeches can really be beneficial for just putting yourself out there in the workforce. So think about that. Look at your resume. What are the things that you want to say in a brief summary of yourself? What do people need to know? What are you good at? What are your goals? 60-second verbal oral summary known as your elevator speech. Make sure you have it. Let's see. A lot of the same things apply that we talked about for the information gathering interview. Just check those because they also apply for this. Being courteous, ending on time, following up, things like that. And the last type of interview is called a media interview. Today we live in a media-saturated environment in which any individual may be approached by a news person and asked to participate in an on-air interview. So this is what that's about. You see random interviews on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or links to them that you can go watch like all the time nowadays. So making sure that if you are doing the interview, making sure you have talking points, and maybe if you're actually randomly asked to participate in one, think about, okay, before you actually do it, say, okay, well, what are you going to be asking me about, so that you can prepare just a couple of things to say ahead of time. We don't really spend too much time on media interviews because it's not really something that I feel is super necessary to focus on. I'd rather focus more on employment interviews than anything else, and a little bit on information gathering. So what's really good is the book gives you a few tips for all of these different types of interviews. So if you want to look back through some of those, especially if you might have an interview coming up, take a look at those. It gives you some great pointers. So that's all for this chapter. Just make sure that you are thinking about the job you want to interview your classmate for. I'll give you your partners by Wednesday morning, and I'll post some of the questions that I want you guys to be talking with in class while you exchange work. And I'll also post your interview assignment, the whole thing, so you'll know. But go ahead and be preparing those 15 questions and job description. Take a look at your resume if you already have one. If you don't, start working on that. That will be due this Friday. So, yeah, I hope you guys have a very productive week and have enjoyed these video lectures. I'm sorry they're not super great quality, but it has to, just got to get it out there. So I hope you guys have a good week, and I will see you very soon. All right, bye.